but she's also the goddess of crossroads, night, light, magic, drugs, the moon, aka the most badass goddess. Welcome, stranger, to Madame Strangeways, where I, Madame Strangeways, narrate your true strange stories of the unexplained. But stick around after the story where I share my strange thoughts and observations for believers and skeptics alike, and I will drag you down a slew of strange rabbit holes along the way, kicking and screaming if needs must. But before we get to today's true strange story, the strangest of shoutouts to my Patreon patrons: TJ Hodder of the Tapes of Trepidation podcast, Gmanmusic, Ted, Keith, and Tori. Thank you so much to my feral fiendish five for supporting the show. Do you want to hear your name at the beginning of every episode? Maybe you'd fancy a free sticker or some bonus content. Join the Patreon today at patreon.com/madamestrangeways. Oh, did you hear that? I think it's about to rain hellcats and hellhounds outside, so you know what that means. On to our true strange story here on Madame Strangeways. Three Women in Black by Good Composer 8409. I grew up in a Greek village where there are a lot of old stories about certain women. I don't even know what to call them in English. In the local folklore, they're women who wear black and can harm people, take someone's eyesight, steal their voice, even push them off cliffs. A local man said that they caused him to have a heart attack, and they later found him under an olive tree, dead. As a kid, these stories always sounded like fairy tales, until something happened to me. I was about 13 and my sister was 14. It was summer and we were out late with our parents. Around 3 a.m. we decided to head home by ourselves, and instead of taking the main street, we took a short side road that passed by our grandmother's house. In Greek villages during summer, women often sit outside in the afternoons and evenings, chatting, and some bring small chairs that they leave in place so they don't have to carry them back and forth every day. So we were used to seeing chairs outside. As we came around the corner and approached our Gram's house, we saw three women dressed entirely in black, wearing kerchiefs, sitting in those small chairs right outside our grandmother's home. They were completely still, not talking, not moving, just sitting there like they were waiting for something. At that hour, it was impossible for them to be our neighbors. The moment we saw them, we both had the same gut feeling. This isn't right. We didn't approach them. We just turned around and went back to the main street as quickly as we could. Even now, I get chills thinking about it. We knew deep down that those weren't just normal women sitting there. The next day, we mentioned this to our grandmother, and she believed us and told us 20 years before, maybe more, she had seen three women wearing black coming out of the summer cinema, walking up a road while she was in the balcony late at night, checking if her husband was coming home. She immediately went inside, locked the door, and put some incense to burn. Good Composer 8409. Good Composer 8409. Thank you so much for allowing me to read your story on the show. I so appreciate you. As soon as I read this story, I was so excited to ask for permission to read it, because not only is it about, let's say, witch adjacent people, but also it's Greek witch adjacent. Are you kidding me? I was so excited. I immediately sent the DM, like, fingers crossed, please, please, please. Because if you don't know, hello, welcome, hello. Whether or not you are new or a regular listener, welcome. So happy to have you. But if you don't know, a little peek behind the curtain, I message or DM every single person whose story that I find on Reddit that I want to read on the story, or whose story I want to read on the episode, I should say. And I would say a good 30% just never respond. That's probably being conservative. Maybe half don't respond at all. So I was so excited when Good Composer responded to me and said, yes, absolutely, you can read my story. Yay! That made my day. So thank you so much for permission to read it. This is just so interesting because when you look at the story on its face, it doesn't sound that scary. Oh, you saw 3 ladies sitting in chairs that are for sitting. But it's not just that. You have to understand the background and the culture that you've been raised in and what you've been told as a kid growing up. And, you have to factor all that into it. And of course, I will always say, regardless of any of that stuff, is if something that would be normal in the daytime is happening at night, it's automatically scary. It's automatically scary. Door knocking, someone knocking on your door or ringing your doorbell at 3 a.m., terrifying. Who's out there? Get out. Go. Shoot. What are you doing out there? You know what I mean? If someone was out on their front lawn, like watering the grass at 3 a.m., that would be weird. So I can completely understand why seeing 3 women dressed in black who you would perceive to be something close to a witch that can give people heart attacks. Yeah, no, it's good. Why don't you guys go inside? You don't need to be out here. I know we're out here, but you don't need to be out there. It's kind of like when you're driving around on a work day during the 9 to 5 hours, you're driving around and you're like, why are all these people here? Why aren't they at work? But you're also there. So why aren't you at work? I guess it's kind of like that. But so scary, and not because anything in particularly paranormal had to happen, but very, very, very spooky. On the other hand, was it just 3 goth girls? I basically wear all black all year long. So maybe I've scared somebody, although there's not 3 of me. That would scare me if there were 3 of me. No, thank you. But wait, going back to the goth ladies, because if it's just 3 goth girls and they're wearing really painful heels or those really cool stompy boots, their feet hurt. They need to sit down. Maybe there was a Stevie Nicks sort of concert in the area. Have we ever thought of that? Or perhaps techies from a theater show, from a play. So there's my attempt at a mundane or naturalistic explanation for why these 3 women were sitting there in chairs outside of Good Composer's grandma's house. But we are far from done, if you cannot tell already from where we are on the status bar of your podcast player. We are far from done. But also, before I get started, if you are interested in the history and all the cultural ramifications and etc. of witches in general, I highly recommend the podcast series called Witches. It's by BBC4 or BBC Sounds, however they market themselves in the US. Very, 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 very interesting. I cannot recommend it enough. But here we go. We're going to jump back to the 3 women that Good Composer encountered. What Good Composer described these women as capable of doing, being, giving someone a heart attack or causing blindness or, etc. Honestly, it would be remiss of me to not immediately jump in to discuss the evil eye. So the evil eye, especially in Greek culture, is a supernatural belief in a curse brought about by a malevolent glare, usually inspired by envy, but not always. I'll get to that in just a second. Amulets to protect against the evil eye have been found dating back to around 5,000 years ago. That is a very long time ago. I think that's like back when the first Great Pyramids were being built. Let's check. Okay, Google. When were the first pyramids built in Egypt?
According to Smithsonian Institution, around 2780 BCE, King Djoser's architect.
Okay, we don't need all that. We don't need all that. We just need the year. What did she say? I wasn't listening. 27 something. That's cool. 2780. Come on. That's pretty close to, about 3000 BC. That's pretty close. Pretty good. Pretty good. All right. So that's a very long time for us to be using evil eye amulets. I mean, even to this day, as recently as 2018, at least, according to keeptalkinggreece.com, 60% of modern Greeks believe that prayers against the evil eye cure headaches. So not just prayers, but also another procedure that simply casts the evil eye away is just salt. You just throw a handful of salt into a glass of water, stir it well while saying the prayer, and in the end, you say the magic phrase, "Let the evil eye dissolve as salt dissolves in the water." Then you don't drink it. You actually just throw it in the toilet. And then you have to wash the glass really well. Or there's something to do with olive oil and water, and you drop it in, and I don't know how it works. I'm not an evil eye expert, clearly, a triple E. Obviously, that's not me. However, the evil eye is not always necessarily given by someone wishing you ill. It doesn't always have malicious intent. In fact, the evil eye can even stem from admiration, like envy, or if you yourself are not humble, you can cast the evil eye on yourself. Dun dun dun, the call was coming from inside the house. But seriously, if this sounds kind of magic-y, that's because it is. But the thing about this magic is that it's condoned by not only the Greek Orthodox Church, but also socially condoned, because it's not witch magic, because witch magic is bad. Witches are bad. Everyone knows that. I mean, I don't think they're bad, but a lot of people do. And throughout history, famously, they haven't had like the best time or the best reputation. So that's why I wanted to use this story as an excuse, blatantly, I admit fully, I wanted to use the story as an excuse to talk about witches and witchcraft, and especially to talk about those things through the Greek lens, which I had never really researched through that angle before. So I'm very, very excited to get into this. So when we're talking about three witches, we're getting into it now. Buckle up. Buckle up, you. It's safety. It's the law. It's rabbit hole safety, because we're going to be going down a whole lot of them. So you better buckle up. So here we go. Right off the bat, you may be thinking, when you're picturing three witches, you may be thinking of the three fates in Greek mythology, which would be really thematic. You might also be picturing the three witches in Macbeth, who, by the way, they were called the Weird Sisters, and not the Strange Sisters. Isn't that interesting? I think those are my cousins twice removed. But no, the reason they're called Weird Sisters and not Strange Sisters is because back in Shakespeare's time, weird meant something different than it does today. And actually, from what I'm reading, it sounds like the Weird Sisters actually informed our modern use of the word weird. Anyway, in Shakespeare's time, weird meant, circa 1400, weird, the noun, is force that sets events in motion or determines their course, what is destined to befall one. So basically determining one's fate, which comes from the Old English weird, spelled W-Y-R-D, which is the only way that I want to spell that word from now on, meaning fate, chance, fortune, destiny, the fates. So isn't that interesting? That's why they were called the Weird Sisters. And of course, 3 is a very witchy number. You've got the rule of 3, which is the belief that your actions will be returned to you threefold. You've also got the cycles of birth, life, and death. That's 3. 1, 2, 3, baby. You've got the triple goddess aspects of mother, maiden, crone. I think I flipped those. Maiden, mother, crone, which is basically the cycles of life, but okay. Then you've also got Beetlejuice, 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 and Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. I think Candyman is 5 times, so I don't think that he follows this, but you get it. 3 is really witchy. Hence, when we're talking about 3 witches, it feels even scarier than just one witch. 3 witches, very scary. And then that brings us back to the Fates, which you may have thought of immediately when you were picturing 3 witches, especially in Greece. So in ancient Greek religion and mythology, the Moirai, often known in English as the Fates, were the personifications of destiny. Let's harken back to the weird sisters, right? Anyway, they were 3 sisters, Clotho, the spinner, Lachesis, the allotter, and Atropos, the inevitable, a metaphor for death. So again, it's this triple goddess. It's this life cycles. Anyway, it's so interesting. Moving on. So the Fates themselves are not necessarily witches, and they're actually not even goddesses either, because generally they were considered to be above even the gods in their roles as enforcers of fate. Although in some representations, Zeus, the chief of the gods, is able to command them. In other times, though, he's not. However, if we're tying them to the weird sisters, and those are definitely witches, but are they though? Because really they were just able to see destiny. They were prophetesses, you might say. Diviners, others might say. Now I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but just keep this in mind. There are multiple words in Greek that can be translated as witch, which is probably why Good Composer wasn't quite sure the word to use in English. But from the 4 or 5 words that I was able to find that also translate to witch, I think the one that is the most appropriate to use for a diviner or a prophetess would be necromantia, which is the root word for necromancy. And it's not what you think. It's not what I thought, anyway. When you're talking about necromancy, in the Greek sense, especially in the ancient Greek sense, it's more like the art of using the dead, using the spirits of the dead to seek advice, bringing them back to life, or asking them to send you a message so that you can see the future through the spirits of the dead. Or it could be the Greek term mantis, which just means prophet or seer. So as you can see, witches back in the day didn't necessarily all just get called witches. They all had these like specific little jobs. Everyone had a subgenre, if you will. And it wasn't until later that we just lumped all of the different kinds of witchy professions into one word and just called them all witches. And I want to ask the question, and I want to answer the question, what even is a witch? Anyway, what is a witch? But I feel like we can't answer that question until we answer the question, what's magic? What's magic? What is even magic? How do you define magic? Well, here we go. Again, I told you to buckle up. Authors William Swatos and Peter Kivisto, I think I nailed those, define magic as any attempt to control the environment or the self by means that are either untested or untestable, such as charms or spells. But before we get too deep into that, we're going to talk about history and etymology of the term magic. So the term magic was pervasive through the Eastern Mediterranean and Western Asia until late antiquity and beyond. Magos, or magician, was a term influenced by and eventually displaced by the Greek term goes, the older word for the practitioner of magic, to include astrology, alchemy, and other forms of esoteric knowledge. This is Wikipedia, clearly, if that's not obvious. This association was in turn the product of the Hellenistic fascination for pseudo-Zoroaster, who was perceived by the Greeks to be the Chaldean, founder of the Magi and inventor of both astrology and magic, a meaning that still survives in the modern day word magic and magician. Don't worry, we will be talking about Zoroaster. Just give me a second. So if you'll recall from my Demon in the Woods episode, and if you have not listened to my Demon in the Woods episode, I do a little mini deep dive into what are demons, what's a demon, and the history of demons. So go listen to that. But anyway, if you'll recall from my Demon in the Woods episode, the modern Western concept of demons as being bad or evil, like angels, good, demons, evil, that concept traveled to ancient Greece and Rome via Zoroastrianism from Iran because of Alexander the Great, who was a North Macedonian, by the way. He didn't want you to remember that, but let's remember it. He was Macedonian, just like Cleopatra the Seventh, which is the Cleopatra that anyone remembers. That Cleopatra. Anyway, she was also North Macedonian. Anyway, Alexander the Great, his empire spanned from Greece all the way to West India, which is really far. So let me just give you a visual. You're probably not sitting in front of a map right now, so let me be your map. Let me be your strange map. To give you a visual of where everything is, Iran, in comparison to where Greek is located, moving east from Greece, you've got Turkey, Iran. So it's really not that far. I mean, Turkey's really big. Look, if I had to walk from Greece to Iran, I would die. That would not happen. It's not happening. But in terms of religion moving around, yeah, it's actually not that far for Zoroastrianism to travel. But anyway, what I didn't tell you in the Demon in the Woods episode is what the Zoroaster part of Zoroastrianism is. Because again, this does come up in the demon episode. This is all tied together and I'm having a great time. So this is Wikipedia. Zarathustra Spitama, more commonly known as Zoroaster, was an Iranian religious reformer who challenged the tenets of the contemporary ancient Iranian religion, becoming the spiritual founder of Zoroastrianism. He also had an impact on Plato, Pythagoras, yep, that one, and the Abrahamic religions, including Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, particularly through concepts of cosmic dualism and personal morality. Cosmic dualism, like good versus bad, angels versus demons, etc. He was probably alive around 1000 BC, with some scholars suggesting a range between 1500 and 500 BC to be possible. And if you clocked Zarathustra, yes, yep. If you're picturing 2001: A Space Odyssey, or if you're picturing Nietzsche, yep, there you go. However, the Greeks had a misunderstanding of Zoroaster as expressed by Plutarch and Agathias. I don't know how to pronounce that. Guys, I've had to pause this 500 times already to double check pronunciation for names. So please bear with me. I'm trying my best. Again, if you are Greek and you are listening to this and I am not doing a good job, please have mercy on me. So, okay, moving back. So the Greeks had a misunderstanding of Zoroaster. In the Western world, Zoroaster has been described as a sorcerer/astrologer, the creator of both magic and astrology. And deriving from that image and reinforcing it was a mass of literature attributed to him that circulated the Mediterranean world from the 3rd BC to the end of antiquity and beyond. Buzz Lightyear. If it's not clear, Zoroaster did not write all of those books that were attributed to him. And so, hence, the Greeks had an understandable misunderstanding. A misunderstandable understanding of Zoroaster. But hold on, let me pause really quick. Let me pause really quick in Iran for just a second here. We're just taking a tiny little Iranian rabbit hole detour. I promise this one comes back around to witchcraft. I promise. This is not unrelated. Because listen, ancient Iran, historically called Persia, was the dominant nation of West Asia for 12 centuries. That is a very long time. So if you are looking at the Avesta, which is the most ancient scriptures of Zoroastrianism, science and medicine rise above class, ethnicity, nationality, race, gender, and even religion. And around 559 to 330 BCE, the 21 books of the Avesta, encompassing 815 chapters, were basically an encyclopedia of science, consisting of medicine, astronomy, law, social science, philosophy, general knowledge, logic, and biology. So the best teachers of medicine and astrology, and I think when we say astrology here, we mean astronomy. We keep saying astrology because I think it's just like an ancient term. We mean astronomy. We don't mean your sun sign or your moon sign or your whatever's in transit sign. We don't mean that. We mean astronomy. Although maybe they were really good at it. Maybe they were really good at astrology. I guess it's possible that they were really, really good at doing placement charts and birth charts. It's possible. Anyway, so the best teachers of medicine and astronomy were Iranian magi and mobeds, which were Zoroastrian. damn, which were Zoroastrian priests who passed their knowledge onto their pupils from one generation to the next. So when the Greeks encountered this advanced understanding of astronomy and medicine, which was way beyond their own, well, here, let me just read you something written by K.E. Edulji from the Zoroastrian Heritage blog. The combination of traits that the Greek authors labeled as magic when it came to Zoroaster, a term that appears to have been derived from the remarkable skills and abilities of the Zoroastrian priests, the Magi, while often used in a disparaging or derogatory sense, also offer grudging acknowledgement of the superior knowledge and skills possessed by the Magi, so much that the efficacy of the Magi's work, notably as doctors and healers, appeared to the Greeks as magic. You guys clocking this? Magic. We can understand that the skills, this continues. We can understand that the skills, especially their medical skills and knowledge of the natural sciences of the Zoroastrian priests, the Magi, through whom these authors understood Zoroastrianism, were of such a high level so as to appear like magic for the more ignorant. Many basic modern science feats would appear as super magic to the Greeks. So, all to say, that's where we get the word magic from. Magi, priest of Zoroastrianism, yada, yada, yada. And they're just so much more advanced. And so it seems magical. And also they considered them sorcerers because of that. But wait, there's more, because of course there is. There's always more. During the late 6th and early 5th centuries BC, the Persian magus was Greekified and introduced into the ancient Greek language as magos and magia. In doing so, it transformed meaning, gaining negative connotations, with the magos being regarded as a charlatan whose ritual practices were fraudulent, strange, that's not bad, that's a good thing, strange, unconventional, and dangerous. For the ancient Greeks, and subsequently for the ancient Romans, magic was not distinct from religion, but rather an unwelcome, improper expression of it, the religion of the other. And I feel like that's really powerful right there, the religion of the other, because you're bringing this term in from Persia being the area around where Iran is. So this Zoroastrianism that comes in, they are actually translating it and actually then giving it a negative connotation because it is other from them. The historian Richard Gordon suggested that for the ancient Greeks, being accused of practicing magic was a form of insult. I don't know about you, but that kind of sounds like sour grapes to me, because they're just not as advanced. You know, feels like just a little bit. So one example of magic that you might find in ancient Greece were amulets. Amulets were one of the most common protections or counter magics used in the Greco-Roman world as protection against such fearful things as curses and the aforementioned evil eye, which were both seen as very real by most of its inhabitants. While amulets were made up of cheap materials, often precious stones were believed to have special efficacy. I feel like that's twice that I've said the word efficacy in an episode, which feels like quite a lot. Many thousands of carved gems were found that clearly had a magical rather than ornamental function. Amulets were also made of organic materials such as beetles. And I can't stop thinking about, what does that look like? What do you mean? How did they didn't have resin. So how... I'm not going to Google it, but I do want to know. Do you know? Do you own an amulet made of beetles? Let me know, madamestrangeways@gmail.com. Amulets were a very widespread type of magic because of the fear of other types of magic, such as curses, being used against oneself. So another very common form of magic that the ancient Greeks used were curse tablets. So a curse tablet is a small tablet with a curse written on it. That's just does what it says on the tin, I guess. This is from Wikipedia. Its name originated from the Greek and Latin words for pierce and bind. The tablets were used to ask the gods, place spirits, or the deceased to perform an action on a person or object or otherwise compel the subject of the curse. This is really interesting. Curse tablets are typically very thin sheets of lead with the text scratched on in tiny, tiny letters. They were often then rolled, folded. Lead? I guess it does say very thin. Can lead fold? I guess I don't know how lead works. I think I'm discovering this right now. How can you fold? All right, let's just, okay, that's fine. The sheets of lead were then somehow rolled, folded, or pierced with nails, and the tablets were then usually placed beneath the ground, either buried in graves or tombs, thrown into wells or pools, sequestered in underground sanctuaries, or nailed to the walls of temples. Tablets were also used for love spells, and when used in this manner, they were placed inside the home of the desired target. Okay. This is crazy because overwhelmingly, the majority of curse tablets for love spells are done by men. They're done by men. You were thinking they were done by women, weren't you? You were picturing women rolling up somehow their little lead sheet tablets and then sneaking into a man's home. That's what you were thinking. Wrong. The majority of curse tablets for love spells are done by men. I mean, that just begs the question, how long has this male loneliness epidemic been going on, really? Anyway, now that I, and hopefully you, have a somewhat tenuous grasp of the concept of magic, that brings us to our next question. What even is a witch, though? What is a witch? At its most basic level, a witch is someone who practices witchcraft. Great. Super helpful, I know. Magic and witchcraft aren't necessarily the same thing, which is confusing, and it is still confusing to me, and I am still trying to work through this. But I guess if magic wasn't confusing, everybody would be doing it. It wouldn't be magic, would it, if everyone understood it and knew how to use it? So historians and anthropologists see the concept of witchcraft, this is Wikipedia again, as one of the ways humans have tried to explain strange misfortune. I really like this, and I hate that I interrupted myself in this sentence. Listen again, this is important. Anthropologists see the concept of witchcraft as one of the ways humans have tried to explain strange misfortune. This is something I also go into in my demon episode. I'm telling you, I didn't realize how deeply connected all of this is. Some cultures have feared witchcraft much less than others because they have tended to have other explanations for strange misfortune. Strange, again. Why is it a bad thing? It's not bad. It's okay. For example, they could explain strange misfortune. We'll just say misfortune, okay? They could explain misfortune being caused by gods or spirits or demons or fairies or other humans who have unwittingly cast the evil eye. We are back to the evil eye. So if you look at the Gaels of Ireland and the Scottish Highlands, historically, they held a very strong belief in fairy folk who could cause supernatural harm. And as a result, this is so interesting, so pay attention. As a result, witch hunting was very rare in the Irish and Scottish regions compared to other regions in the British Isles because they blamed supernatural harm and misfortune on fairy folk and not witches. Isn't that crazy? So moving on. In ancient Greece and the Roman Empire around 8th century BCE, individuals known as goetes practiced various forms of magic, including divination. Remember the weird sisters and the three fates? So divination, spellcasting, and invoking supernatural entities. While some forms of magic were integrated into religious practices, others were seen as superstitious and potentially harmful. So you remember I said, listen, the evil eye is totally accepted. It's totally not scary and weird and bad. However, other forms of magic are seen as superstitious and bad. So there are accounts of people being prosecuted and punished for witchcraft in the ancient Greco-Roman world before Christianity. In ancient Greece, for example, Theoris, a woman of Lemnos, was prosecuted for and executed along with her family. Records refer to her as Pharmacus, a potion specialist, where we get the word pharmacy from, a mantis, like I mentioned before, so otherwise a diviner, like our three fates, like our weird sisters. And she was also referred to as a Hydia, a priestess. However, the sentence against her and her family was for impiety. Interesting, impiety. One would think that anything that has the word pie in it can't be that bad. Can't be that bad. Hey-yo. The social perception of magic practitioners in ancient Greece was a mixed bag. While magicians and oracles were often seen as valuable and respected members of society, witches faced a different fate because of course they did. Of course they did. Due to their association with darker forms of magic, witches were often marginalized and feared, which is so not cool because witches are cool. Come on. However, it's important to note that the perception of magical practitioners varied across different city-states and communities. While some individuals sought their help in times of need, others shunned them due to superstitious or religious beliefs. I do think it's worth mentioning that the magicians that are mentioned as often being seen as valuable were men. They were men. And witches are typically women. Isn't that interesting? So I know we talked earlier about like the kinds of different phrases that there are for different types of witches and their specific types of powers. So I'll just kind of share those with you right now. So while ancient Greek does not have a word that directly translates as witch, the Greek term goedia basically puts an umbrella, a little spooky, strange umbrella over diviners, magicians, healers, and seers all at once. But again, there's all these little subtypes that you can find. So pharmacus, where we get pharmacy from, they would have been healers, and they would have, been otherwise known as like wise women or like folk healers. So, it sounds great, right? It sounds great. You're sick, you can go to the folk healer, you can go to this pharmacus. However, if you can heal, you can also hurt. And so that's where some of the suspicion about these women came from was, well, depending on the dose, something can either hurt you or help you. So some people ended up referring to them as poisoners instead of folk healers. And in fact, in Exodus 22:18 in the Bible, there is a famous verse that you may know about not suffering a witch to live. And that verse may be referring specifically to the folk healers / poisoners, or it could also potentially be referring to priestesses who engaged in ritual prostitution. But King James of the Bible, the famous King James, we did talk about him as well in the demon episode, because he has, I don't know how else to say it, he's kind of got a hard on for witches and for killing them, and also women. So that's fun. What a fun time. Now onto some famous Greek witches. We're going to start with Hecate. Now, is she a witch or is she a goddess? We again come to this question that we had with the fates as well. Well, of course, she is a goddess, and she is the goddess of witchcraft, but she's also the goddess of crossroads, night, light, magic, drugs, the moon, aka the most badass goddess. Show me a goddess who is a goddess of that many cool things. She's so cool. So as a goddess of witchcraft, Hecate has been incorporated in various systems of neo-pagan witchcraft, Wicca, and neo-paganism, in some cases associated with the wild hunt of Germanic tradition. Now, does the wild hunt sound familiar to you? No? Then you need to go listen to my Sleepy Hollow episode, because we discuss in small detail, but still at all, the wild hunt. It's just so strange because I had never heard of the wild hunt before. Then I did my research for the Halloween episode, for the Sleepy Hollow episode, the wild hunt came up. And then in research of doing this episode, what should come up again but the wild hunt? It's basically kind of like a super cool metal group of ghouls and skeletons, and I don't know, it just kind of looks like it's the cover of a heavy metal album, is basically my gist of what the wild hunt is. All these creatures just flying in the sky. Anyway, apparently Hecate's involved with that. In Wicca, Hecate has been, in some cases, become identified with the crone aspect of the triple goddess, which we kind of talked about earlier, right? Our three, how the number 3 is very witchy. So apparently she's associated with the crone, which I think is really weird because famously in Greek mythology and Greek ancient tradition, witches were hot. Witches were young and hot. Versus when you're talking about Roman witches and Roman mythology, witches were crone-like and ugly and monstrous. And I feel like there's something there. I need to do more research on this and figure out why. I think I know. I think I have an idea of why you would identify certain potentially powerful women as being ugly monsters, but I would just be guessing. So Hecate was not always a goddess of witchcraft. That came later. Because she was associated with the spirits of the dead and the night and the underworld, people began to associate her with witchcraft. Because remember the curse tablets? Remember those? How they would, and also not just the curse tablets, the diviners who are using the dead to see the future, like the dead. So because she was associated with the spirits of the dead and the night and the underworld, that then tied her to the witchcraft that is happening around the dead and the night and the underworld. And hence she became a goddess of witchcraft. Yay! So some other Greek witches from mythology include Kirke, which is spelled Circe, but not like Game of Thrones. It seems like it should be read Circe, but apparently it is pronounced Kirke. Or it could be Kirke or Kirke. I'm not sure. It's one of those. Anyway, she was another witch from mythology, and she lived alone on an island far away from any men. There were only nymphs and animals on her island, and even then, she couldn't avoid a bunch of men showing up on her island, getting up all in her business. So she turned them all into pigs, and somehow she was the bad guy. I don't know how. She ends up marrying Odysseus, or maybe not marrying, but becoming Odysseus's lover. I think she sires a child with him. Anyway, Medea is another Greek witch, and she actually trained under Kirke. Kirke? She trained under her, which doesn't, Circe sounds cooler. I'm going to just say, I might be wrong, but Circe sounds cooler. All right, and I want to wrap up by reading some of this really interesting essay, I'm not sure, called From Goddess to Hag, the Greek and the Roman Witch in Classical Literature by Barbette Stanley Spaeth. Forgive me. So I'm just going to read a small excerpt from it. Medea and Kirke, for example, are both of divine lineage. And I'm just going to say Circe. And Circe is called a dread goddess, which is so cool, while Medea is a priestess of Hecate. It may be that in the earliest stages of their mythic life, these figures were not thought to be witches, that is, magical practitioners, for the concept of magic was not fully formed until the 5th century BCE. I should have probably put that earlier in the episode. That's interesting. The concept of magic was not fully formed until the 5th century BCE. Ancient witches, in fact, seem obsessed with the things of the body. They are driven largely by bodily lust. Circe desires Odysseus for her bed. Medea lusts for Jason. Samantha craves her Delphis. Folia has a masculine libido, quote unquote, and Moreau and Fotis are all driven by their sexual desires. Witches' lust is considered so overpowering that it can cause male impotence. Imagine. In Homer, Hermes warns Odysseus that having sex with the witch Circe might make him weakly and unmannered. Nope, weakly and unmanned. In Petronius, the woman Circe causes Encolpius. Jesus, why did I do this to myself? I am so sorry. This has been such a struggle. I was so interested in this topic, and then actually reading all these names aloud is really difficult. Okay. Circe causes Encolpius to become impotent. Interesting. Although he tries to heal his impotence with the help of the witches Procelenos and Onothea. Oh no, That's me this whole episode. Their own lust also proves more than he can handle. So he gets impotent from a witch and he goes to other witches, like, help me with my witch impotence, my witch potence, if you will. The lustful actions of these witches are a form of inversion of the natural order, for according to ancient conceptions, it was the male who was supposed to be the active sexual partner. In assuming the active role, witches call into question the normative sexual roles of men and women in classical culture, threatening the culturally constructed boundaries of male and female. As for modern witches, like 2025 witches, there's actually not a ton that I could find on modern Greek folkloric magic or witchcraft. And I think that's kind of by design. Maybe if I spoke Greek and I could read and write Greek, maybe then I would have an easier time. But as an American, unfortunately, I really couldn't find much any more modern than the evil eye stuff that I shared at the beginning, or anything past 1900, when the book Modern Greek Folklore and Ancient Greek Religion, A Study in Survivals, was written by John Cuthbert Lawson. And I will close this episode on a little snippet of the different kinds of magic that could happen in 1900. So for this particular spell, it's a spell of binding, and it would be used, let's just say, by someone who is jealous and does not want a marriage to be consummated. Because then ideally, if the marriage isn't consummated, then they can break up, and then whoever is casting the spell can get together with whoever it is, because now they haven't been officially married. Okay, so this is a spell of binding. Its purpose is to fetter the virility of the husband, and so to prevent the consummation of the marriage. The rite itself is simple. Either the jealous girl herself. Okay, I think we're making a big assumption here, John Cuthbert Lawson, because we now know that it was mostly men that were doing the love-based curse tablets. So let's pull that back in. I don't know that it's always going to be a jealous girl. Anyway, the jealous person, or a witch employed by this jealous person, attends the wedding. The gall of this, attends the wedding, taking with them a piece of, this is the witch. The witch employed by the person attends the wedding. The witch takes a piece of thread or string in which 3 loops have been closely made. During the reading of the gospel or the pronouncement of the blessing, the witch then pulls the ends of the string, forming thereby 3 knots in the string, and at the same time mutters the brief incantation, "I bind blank and blank, and the devil betwixt them." How cool is that? You're binding them together, but the devil's in the middle of those. Okay. The thread is subsequently buried or hidden, and unless it can be found and either burnt or have the knots untied, there is small hope for the man to recover from his impotence. There is no doubt, I think, that the extreme fear in which this spell is held has in some cases so worked upon the bridegroom's nerves as to render the binding actually effective, just as extreme faith in miraculous icons occasionally affects cures of, I don't know, I cut the last bit of that off, but you see what I'm saying? Some of the grooms are so scared of a witch casting an impotence spell on them that they then render themselves impotent. Did I know when I started this episode that I was going to be talking about impotence so much? No, I didn't. Am I bothered by it? Also no. Also no. Hopefully you weren't either. So all to say, the 3 women that good composer saw sitting outside of Grandma's house, who were they? Were they the 3 fates? Were they perhaps the Hocus Pocus witches? I don't remember their names off the top of my head. So who knows? We'll never know. We'll never know if they were intending to cast an evil eye. We'll never know if they were trying to cast some sort of impotence spell. We'll never know. We'll never know. But if you have a strange encounter with someone that may be considered a witch, or at least witch adjacent, you can send me your story and I may read it on the show. Email me, madamestrangeways@gmail.com. And again, good composer, thank you so much for allowing me to read your story. And I hope everybody learned at least one thing from this episode. In fact, let me know. Leave a comment on Spotify or email me at madamestrangeways@gmail.com. What was the most interesting thing that you learned from this episode? I'd love to hear it. Remember that you can feel afraid and not be in danger. You're safe here with me. Probably. Thank you for joining me for more true strange stories of the unexplained. Now, I'm running a one-madam show here, so please do me a strange solid and follow the podcast, or leave me a rating on Apple or Spotify, and maybe even join the Patreon at patreon.com/madamestrangeways for bonus content. Madame Strangeways is produced and narrated by me, Madame Strangeways. Theme music is by Marina Ryan at marinamakes.co. Cover art is by Andrea Chiselle Roldan at Cult of Teddy on Instagram. Every strange story is shared with the permission of the author. You can submit your own true strange story to madamestrangeways@gmail.com or check out the website madamestrangeways.com. See you soon, she said ominously.